painted at Oldham, on the side of the Condor Ironworks, an enormous mural. It's about 170 feet long, and I made no concessions at all to the surrounding bleakness of the architecture. I thought I'll use these bright primary colours. The first job I did was to paint the mural into 4 sections, banded by red, blue and yellow, and then attack the surface with masses of dark blue and red and really screaming colours. The Oldham Athletic supporters' scarves in blue and white forming enormous C's and patterns. There was at the time, before all the community was knocked down, it was a big clearance area for a motorway to blast its way through on the way to Rochdale. And there was a happy little community of people. Terrace Street's very much like Coronation Street. Most of the people living on the street were characters in their own right. One was a woman that used to sing in clubs at night, a lady called Millie, a real dear. And then there was a local tough guy that worked in the mill, you see, and he had a couple of children, a couple of boys. There was another guy in a boiler suit called Frank, and he standing on the front doorstep, and everybody thought, you know, Frank is a hard-working guy, but he'd never been to work for about 30 years, you know. I think he was a real good character. And I painted all these people on the side of the condo, full-size portraits of them. And I painted all the children in the football crowd. I painted individual portraits of about 30 of them. Desperate Dan, Kojak, Corky the Cat, David Essex, Bay City Rollers, Noddy. They're all in there somewhere. Press photographer, policeman, naughty boy that runs on the pitch when the other side has scored a goal, being arrested. And that's the sort of mural that ought to be in a place like Oldham, because every other colour is muted. What may be very important about Oldham is the fact that it cheers people up when they see a design like that, either from a distance as they're passing by on the bus or going to work on a dank February morning. And it's the same, you know, like the flowers at Rochdale. You can see that off the main railway line as you're going from Leeds to Manchester. You can see this postage stamp size distant floribunda, and it brings a smile to your face.
I think they should really have been built, these flats. Not really. Do you know what they should have built round here?
Should put new proper houses in.
Yeah, that you've got a front and back garden. Say that you walk out your house and walk play on the landing, you want to kick up a ball, right? And it's too wet to go downstairs. You can't because you smashed the wrong window.
What really annoys me about a place like Hume is the fact, well, it annoys a lot of people nowadays, is that the fact that planners, in all innocence, they put these buildings up, you know, they've done work studies and how many people and areas like that, but really the whole neighbourhoods have been ruined.
Round here, there's nowhere to play or anything. I've been living in these flats now for nearly 6 years, so that's ever since they've been built. And the first time round here it was good, but after about a year, it started to get boring.
What's really needed to counteract the grey massiveness of a place like Hume or Detroit or whatever they're doing in Hemel Hempstead is these designer, artists, architect cooperatives that they had in the Renaissance. They don't get them anymore. You know, the artist is called in at the very last stage of a building and say, what can you do about this? And crack it, blow it up. But you know, like Michelangelo was called in at the very beginning of the project. In fact, he sort of dispensed with all the architects and said, well, let me do it anyway, because I can design things better than you. You know, I don't want to get too much against architects, because they're on economic budgets as well. But it's the idea that at Hume, no artist was invited to help And at one time, actually, the architects were going to design Hume with white tiles, but they didn't. They built it in grey concrete instead, another economy measure that we've all got to suffer, you know. So instead of having something that was rather spanking and pristine, we've got something rather drab and dreary. In fact, if you look round all these bloody concrete buildings are shoving up all over the country, and if you look closely, even at modern ones, they're all stained. You can see where some of the metal, the reinforcing, is leaking through to the surface. So really, it just never, ever pays to make an economic job of anything. You've got to do a proper job all the time. I mean, you can colour it, you see, or stain it. And you don't necessarily have to stain it so it comes out candy pink. You know, why not shove a real load of strong pigment in? And so you could have something like dark blue and dark brown concrete with sort of crystalline effects on.
You know Irish gnomes? You know what I mean? You know the supposed to be little fellas? Well, he drawed like little houses. You know what they're supposed to live in, like mushrooms. He drawed some of them over there.
I don't know. What I was trying to do at Hume really was just put a bit of madness back into life, and you know, not that I particularly like terraced houses all that much or whatever. What there was there before was just a bit pokey, I suppose. But the idea of sort of, they're still doing it in these cities. They're knocking down all these properties and sort of. The old houses, if they knocked 2 or 3, remember that film Beatles and Help, where they went in the 4 terraced houses and they sort of went in and it was all spread out and all knocked into one big house, and there's something like that, you know. And if you got sort of these old Victorian houses and tip some liquid rubber over the roofs or some pure resin so that they'd be absolutely waterproof and perfect, and then just jazzed about a bit with the interiors and painted some nice murals in them, and had sort of, instead of pre-stressed concrete panels, why not pre-stressed super duper murals so that the houses were built with all the colour on? So it'd be tremendous then. You know, this, and that's what I was trying to do at Hume. You see, contrast with the massive areas of concrete with areas of real vivid, powerful colour.
Yes, my friend, we did a street again. Yes, my friend, my good friend.
I decided while I was there, we'd try and get some community art going. I showed the various mums how to make carnival masks. Well, in the space of a month, we'd really transformed Hume. We arranged to have a party with a couple of discos, a steel band on the back of a lorry came along, and Hume was really quite revitalised that day. Bridges at Rochdale and bridges at Bury were rather interesting in the sense that they were old industrial remains that had never been bothered with for years and years. The corporation dutifully came round every decade, or in the case of the bridges of Bury, they hadn't been painted at all for 50 years. They came round and they used to paint them grey.
Dear sir, it would appear that you did not obtain the permission of my authority to paint these bridges, nor did you consider the cost to the ratepayer of maintaining such a colour scheme on bridges which had virtually no maintenance liability.
If you sort of bothered to clean them up and chisel away and look at the old badges, you'd find that each town would have its own coat of arms, the usual Latin motto on, like Vincit Laborium, but it was always something to do with laborium, some hard graft to overcome many obstacles. And I thought, well, these badges, they look dreadful painted grey every 10 years. It's about time they were painted brilliant colours.
I've asked that the bridges be returned to their original condition. In the meantime, I must insist you do not paint any more bridges.
So that they ended up looking rather like Tudor Hampton Court type of thing. There was a bit of public reaction because the old familiar landmarks had been altered from their horrible greyness, which blended into the natural horrible greyness of most of Lancashire. And they'd now become jazzy and lovely and attractive.
With regard to the Berry bridges, which you claim to have painted, only one has been spotted so far, which is the responsibility of the gas board.
Last year, I was asked by community centre at Burnley if I could do a design on the end wall of their hut, their new gang hut. And what had happened, you see, the building had been open for a few months, and already it was covered in graffiti. It was a grey brick building, architect design sort of stuff, but very boring. And it's hardly wonder that the children had drawn on to express their own displeasure at the building or the design of the building. The activities inside were pretty good. So when I arrived every day at the community centre, I would select various children out wearing colourful gear and say, come on, I'll paint you on the wall. There were about half a dozen lads dressed up with big flared trousers on, short haircuts, Burnley supporters, and they used to be practising kung fu moves on this patch of grass nearby. A couple of other lads turned up on a go-kart, a bogey. Another girl turned up with a dog, sort of a bulldog, and he was called Nelson. I enjoyed painting Nelson on. I painted the studs on his collar. I'd like to think that the colours and paintings that I'm doing on the walls and on the bridges are really cheering people up, you see, because for centuries they've been living in these bloody grey dumps so that they become grey-minded. You know, it's the sort of thing that's intolerable in the south of England, you know. I mean, the people there are far more conscious of their environment and far more up in arms about it. But in the north, we've just been sort of downtrodden visually for centuries. You know, bossed about and kicked around and high on him. Come on.